I must have been 16 years old. My entire family, Saturday night, went to a kosher Chinese restaurant in Midtown Manhattan. I was 16. And Moshe P. King, everyone got excited. This section here, it was very good food. The Chinese, you have to thank them, whatever, they do good. Moshe P. King, forget about it. That was fantastic. After dinner, so we would come back to the car in New York, and we were crossing Fifth Avenue and 47th Street. It's like the entrance to the Diamond District. But what was more striking than the Diamond District in the middle of the night were these three young kids, and they were pasting up posters on each of the lampposts along Fifth Avenue. I was a curious teenager, so I wanted to read, what did it say? Come this Tuesday night to Jews for Jesus, it read, and learn more about your Jewish Messiah. And I was just flabbergasted. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen these missionaries on the streets of Montreal, because you have a very serious problem in this city, as you have in any city with a large Jewish community. Montreal is home to one, not the largest Jewish community in Canada, but one of them. And the missionaries know it, and that's why they're here. That's why we're here, to convert the Jews of this town to Christianity. We'll be talking about that. But when I was a kid, that was the most outrageous thing in the world. I was born 15 years after the Holocaust, and I was very aware of the fact that the Shoah, the destruction of European Jewry, only occurred in Christian countries. I was just very aware of that. And if I wasn't, the non-Jews that I grew up with in Brooklyn, which is a highly gentrified area, I mean, there was a Jewish neighborhood and an Italian, sort of Irish neighborhood and a Hispanic neighborhood. The anti-Semitism was very, very strong. A lot of anti-Semitism when I was a kid. When I was a kid in New York, you just did not walk past a bunch of non-Jewish kids. You just didn't. There was no such thing as you walked past a whole bunch of non-Jewish kids and there was a good morning Jew. That would not happen. You crossed the street to the other side, and if you made the mistake of walking past them, you just hope nothing more than something like Christ killer. You wouldn't get anything more than that, right? They'd actually accuse me of killing Jesus. And I wasn't even a neighborhood at the time. I was just stunned by this accusation. In any event, so to become like Jews for Jesus would be like Jews for Hezbollah. It just made no sense to me, although now we're living in a time where there are Jews who somehow are the best spokespeople for our enemies, which is very striking, isn't it? Nevertheless, I began to argue with them. And it was a conversation that was going absolutely nowhere. I don't know if you've ever tried this. It's not a satisfying experience. And we're just arguing and going nowhere very quickly. And this elderly man was watching this spectacle in Midtown Manhattan. And he walked over to me. He grabbed me by the arm. He pulled me away from them. And he said to me, you really shouldn't be arguing with these people. You don't know enough. Instead, you should just follow them around, and as they paste up posters, if you're really inclined to do something about this, and then when they put up their posters, you schlep them down. I was utterly flabbergasted by this suggestion. I wasn't sure, I'm not sure to this day, if they were actually Jewish or not. I went to yeshiva all my life. I don't know enough to argue with these people. I didn't go to any yeshiva. I went to really a good yeshiva. I went to the Mir Yeshiva, famous yeshiva. We had a whole space station named after it. I mean, it's a fine place. I mean, we were there at yeshiva. I think we had to be there at 7:30 in the morning, and we had mishmar. I don't know enough to argue with these people. I should be pulling. It was I walked away from the whole thing very frustrated that there was nothing I could do. The following summer, I visited the land of Israel. My uncle lived in the Jewish quarter of the Old City, my father's older brother, of blessed memory. And he told me that when I saw him right on Miskav Ladach, The previous Shabbat, my uncle had a very unusual guest at his home. He had a Christian pastor as a guest. And Saturday night, before the pastor, when he was leaving, before he left, he wanted to give my uncle a present. He wanted to give him a gift. He wanted to show him gratitude. So he gave my uncle a gift. What did he give him? You were there? Yeah, you were there. He gave him a Christian Bible. I still have it. It's a blue King James red letter edition, Christian King James version. And he shows this to me. Give a look at what I got. Like, give a look at what we got here. Like he had the manual from the other team, you know what I mean? And I told him, Mayor, that's exactly what I want to read. That's what I want to. And I began to study it. It was a few days later. So my uncle lives on Rehov Misgav Ladach, which means that from his roof you could see the Kotel. And that's why, of course, I would pray at the Western Wall. The first time you're in Israel, first time you're praying at the Western Wall, who isn't moved by that? And I'm standing there in a world that I will never forget. I'm talking to God in a way that I had never had a conversation with the Almighty God. And I'm davening there, and as I'm praying, I feel a tap on my shoulder. In the middle of davening, and I turn around, and there's this fellow standing there with a kippah on his head. The cardboard one with the staple that they give out when you go? And he asked me, he said, excuse me, do you know the Lord? Like, what am I doing, playing handball here? What are we, like, of course I do. I went to yeshiva. He said, you mean you know who Yeshua is? And I said, of course I do. I went to yeshiva with him. He was in my class. I was thinking of Yeshua Jacobus. I had no idea. So we right there began to unravel this cross-cultural communications problem. And I blew my entire 2-week vacation on him. We studied together, both returned back to New York, we were both from, and he did tshuva. I will say this before we begin. There is nothing as special, there's nothing as wonderful as saying to a Jew, welcome home. There is nothing more wonderful. I envy them. I envy these Jews who somehow find themselves in the church, because their ability to do tshuva is remarkable. It's something I could never know. I've never been a Christian. But imagine that, to be in the church and to do tshuva is a remarkable thing. Christians, evangelical Christians, I guess that I'm in Montreal, this must be said, because given the makeup of this city, I think it's vital that you have a better understanding of the Christian world so you know who we're going to be speaking about tonight. So Montreal is noted for its very striking churches in the city. Many of them are just museum pieces, and many of them are empty quite frequently, but how they built them is really remarkable. So this city is known to have a very large and well-known Roman Catholic community, old-time Roman Catholic community right here, and you'd expect that in Quebec. So it's important for you to know that the Roman Catholic Church, especially standing here, just realize it, the Roman Catholic Church, which is by far the largest Christian denomination in the world. It's so large that if you took every other Christian denomination and added it up, it wouldn't be as large as Roman Catholicism, okay? But it's important for you to know that the Roman Catholic Church today, by and large, is not interested in converting Jews. Generally speaking, that's an overgeneralization. I can think there's a few notable exceptions that come to mind right now. But generally speaking, Roman Catholics are not going to try to convert you. Among the Protestant Christians, there are many here in this city. They're very more prominent in other areas, like I can think of Alberta, which has a lot of evangelical Christians. Well, liberal Protestants, and there are Episcopalian, Anglican churches, and these people are not interested in converting you either. The people we're going to be speaking about tonight are fundamentalist, evangelical, born-again Christians. In all cases, they're Christian Zionists, are the kinds of Christians that stand with Israel. These are the people that are completely devoted to converting each and every one of you and those that you love to the Christian religion. They're spending about $500 million a year annually on converting Jews in North America to the church. There are in Montreal many Messianic congregations in your city. A Messianic congregation is a church that's designed to look like a synagogue. So you saw one, you would think it's a shul. They've got a bima with the Torah is read from, a Shabbat. It's designed to the rabbi there, who's likely to be of Jewish extraction. The prayers are said in Hebrew very traditionally. There are many of them here. There are even more of them in Toronto and Winnipeg and on the West Coast in British Columbia. There's all over this country. Wherever there are Jewish communities, there are missionaries that are targeting the Jews who are there. Montreal is an interesting city because it has a sizable Jewish community, but also a traditional Jewish community. And the size of the traditional Jewish community in Montreal is unique and special. And many Jewish people are very committed to remaining Jewish, may not be observant, may not go to shul, but they know that they're Jewish. Well, they've thought of that as well. And what the Messianic movement, what these missionaries do is they seek to blur the distinction between Judaism and Christianity in order to lure Jews who might otherwise resist a straightforward Christian message. Many people ask the question, why? Why are these missionaries so committed to converting Jews to Christianity? In Israel, it's a stage 4 cancer. In Israel, for those who don't know, there is no such thing as stage 5. But in Israel, there's a phenomenon that is not the case here in Montreal or in Toronto or in Winnipeg or in London. In that I can be confident that your shul and other shuls in this city, as an example, would have virtually no relationship with the church in Montreal. There's just, good morning, good afternoon, but you're not involved, you're not working with them. There's no relationship between a synagogue and a church in New York City. That's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen in Baltimore or Los Angeles, San Diego or Chicago. But in Israel, the evangelical Christians are deeply connected to the government. They're very supportive of Israel. They're very, very close to the American president, who's at this critical stage in history, is very involved in what is happening. We are observing today we're living in a historical time, which will be spoken about for a very, very long time. History is changing before our eyes. Why God has chosen us to live during this remarkable moment, I'm not quite sure. I would have thought that the man after whom I was named, Tovia singer, he was murdered by the Germans in the spring of 1944 when almost all of Hungarian Jewry was destroyed. I would think he would have been a much better candidate to live during a period which I believe is a messianic moment. That means we are right now in the midst of a messianic era that's unfolding right now. We are in a Shas Hagula. We are right now living prophetically. We are observing prophecies that are unfolding before our eyes right now. It's so interesting that the Rambam of blessed memory writes in his Laws of Kings at the very end, chapter 12. It's a long chapter, and in it he explores the reason why Christianity and Islam even emerged, and he speaks about the coming of Mashiach in ways that no one else had. And he makes it very, very clear that really we can look at messianic prophecies in Tanakh and try to figure out what exactly is going to happen, but really it will only be that generation that's at the time of the Geula, that's the time of Mashiach. Only they will fully comprehend what these passages mean. And it's very striking that we're told as an example in Tanakh that the implacable enemy of the Jewish people in the Messianic age will be Persia, or modern day Iran, which is very unusual for many reasons. Because, for example, the Persian Empire was rather benign toward the Jews. Not only benign, they were kind of nice to us. Like, it was the king of Persia, Cyrus the Great, who told the Jews, go back to Israel and go build the temple and return. And in fact, 42,360 Jews did exactly that. They moved to Israel and built a second commonwealth. Jewish life under the Persian Empire was benign. It was okay. The Talmud was assembled under the Sasanian Empire. It was comfortable. Life was good. It wasn't like living under the Roman Empire. The Persians there was no reason for Ezekiel and Zechariah, who lived 2,500 years ago. There's no reason to say, just understand that at the end of days, Persia is coming up against Jerusalem to destroy you. They're not Arabs. They're not B'nai Ishmael, so they don't have a historical, biblical reason for interacting with the Jews in this way. We don't have any land issue with Persia. We're separated by about 1,000 kilometers between Eretz Yisrael and Iran. And yet we're living in those days. And one of the things we can see, examining what is occurring right now, is that whatever it said in Tanakh is happening literally. But they just couldn't have imagined it. But what we can now, because we have witnessed so much, we can now extrapolate that what we are told in Tanakh will unfold in a very literal way. Well, we're not the only ones who have noticed this. Evangelicals have noticed this as well. Yerushalayim, we are told in the Hebrew Bible, has to be liberated before Mashiach comes. You know the book of Zechariah, Sefer Zechariah, who lived during the Persian Empire? He was one of 3 prophets that lived during after the destruction of the Babylonian Empire, or more specifically the Neo-Babylonian Empire. So Zechariah is not an easy sefer to understand. It's not the most difficult, but it's not so easy. In fact, imagine what Rashi wrote during his lifetime, right? How indebted all of us are to Rashi. What he did was a superhuman feat, right? He wrote a commentary on everything. I've had the good fortune to lecture at universities around the world who have libraries of rare books. And I've seen at Cambridge at the University of Pennsylvania Gemaras that are on cloth, that are written on a scroll, and they're from the 9th and 10th century, so there's no Rashi or Tosfos on it. And I can assure you, I'm staring at it just as you'd be staring and go, how did Rashi understand this? There was no Rashi, right? It's like, how did Rashi learn Gemara out of Rashi? It's just, it seems to be a superhuman feat, which none of us can wrap our heads around. But Rashi never writes an introduction to any of the Sfarim on which he wrote, with one exception. That's the book of Zechariah. The only Hakdama, the only introduction that Rashi ever gives, and you can just imagine the volume of material that this great giant, the greatest of the medieval commentators, he only writes a Hakdama, an introduction to the book of Zechariah. And I encourage you to read it. And he first starts off by saying that I don't have a Masorah for the book of Zechariah. I'll just translate that. What that means is that Rashi wasn't inventing his own religion, or he was passing on rather a rich tradition that was passed on to him from his Rabbeim and so on. But as it turns out, Rashi wants you to know from the beginning that for Sefer Zechariah, I don't have a Masorah for this. And therefore, the commentary in this Sefer is to the best of my understanding. That's the kind of man he was. He was not just the Rabbi in Shal Yisrael, he was also very much the progenitor of the Jewish people. It's estimated about 1/3 of Ashkenazic Jewry are descendants of Rashi. Zechariah indeed is difficult, and he says that. He says this Sefer is filled with things that are hidden. Now what he means by that in the first 5 chapters, there are 8 visions. Some of them very, very famous, like the one we would read on Shabbos Chanukah. So it's not very complicated, but it's not the kind of thing you just read through. Zechariah, the book of Zechariah, is not the kind of book you just pick up and read it, and it's not that way. But there is one chapter, and that's chapter 12, which is the whole end of the book of Zechariah is messianic, from chapter 7 all the way to through chapter 14. But what's key about it is chapter 12 is very easy to understand. When you're 120 and you stand before God, you had better be able to say that I read the 12th chapter, because you're not going to have any excuse for not reading it. You don't need any commentary. It's just really simple. The Jews return back to the land of Israel before the Messiah comes. They then liberate Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is now in the hands of the Jews. The nations of the world will go to war against Eretz Yisrael over the status of Yerushalayim. And then in Zechariah 12, we have the event of Mashiach ben Yosef. People are killed in a tremendous trauma. Many Jews will get killed. This, the Gemara tells us, is Mashiach ben Yosef. This is the moment that draws the people of Israel together in a unity. They will mourn over this event like people mourned over Yoshiyahu, one of the greatest Davidic kings. It's interesting, it's the only source for a mechitza in all of Tanakh. It says men and women will mourn separately. That's where it comes from. And so the chapter is very clear. In fact, the Gemara in Megillah tells us that this moment of Milchemes Gog uMagog, this final moment leading up to the coming of Mashiach, will occur on Sukkot. And for that reason, the Haftorah read on Shabbos Chalamoid Sukkot is Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, Milchemes Gog uMagog. So we're living in a really remarkable time. And then Mashiach ben David comes. That's where we are. Now, the world who studies Scripture knows this very, very well. And back in the 70s, Christians were very aware that, Jerusalem had just been liberated. And in 1972, only half a decade after Jerusalem, overnight, I was a little boy at the time, but I remember the dancing in the streets of New York. Har Bayit B'Yadeinu, the Temple Mounts on our hands, was a remarkable time. Evangelical Christians realize that we are living at the time of the end. These fundamentalist Christians firmly believe that Jesus cannot make his second coming unless the Jews are first converted to Christianity. It's based in an obscure passage in Matthew 23. Some of you went to yeshiva, you studied this. The last verse, we're told, Jesus says, I'm not coming back unless you, the Jews, say, blessed he that comes in the name of the Lord. So therefore, it's only the mass conversion of the Jews to Christianity that can bring about second coming. I don't think it needs a footnote here that the idea of a second coming is not in Tanakh, it's not in anywhere. That's a red flag for a false religion. But we're going to set that aside for a moment. The key point is they believe that the second coming can only happen if the Jews are converted to Christianity. You, ladies and gentlemen, are holding up the show. Get with the program. So evangelicals are gathering in Western Switzerland, Lausanne, a city that is one of the oldest Jewish communities in Europe. And some of their best minds gather to study the Jews and figure out why has it been so difficult in the past to convert the Jews. I mean, imagine for a moment, Christian missionaries came and just to South America and just converted everybody. Portuguese missionaries came to Brazil and they just converted everybody to Christianity. And Brazil produces the largest Roman Catholic, it's the largest Roman Catholic country in the world. I mean, Europe, Christianity spreads like wildfire. The Jews, with all their problems, they're the one group that we just can't figure out how to. Why are the Jews so? And not only that, it bothers them that the Jews won't convert. It's tiresome for them, because it shouldn't be that way. I mean, after all, they're the only people that can read their Bible in its original language. You know how many Christian schools there are for kids in Montreal? Do you know that none of them are teaching their children Hebrew? Isn't that striking? Do you know and many government-supported schools right here in this country. Imagine that, but they're Christian schools. And they believe that the Hebrew language is a holy language. They believe that God inspired the prophets of the Old Testament in the Hebrew language. Yet they're studying Latin. Like, why? So the Jews can read their Bible in its original language. Jews have a reputation, regardless of what you think about us, for being a rather clever people, smart folks. So you have people who have a reputation for their intelligence, who can read their Bible. They're the only ones who were expecting a Messiah 2,000 years ago. Bear in mind, the idea of a Mashiach Messiah 2,000 years ago was unknown to the ancient world. They just would have no clue what you're talking about. The idea of a Christos, it only means that oil is poured on you. You could be getting a shiatsu massage and you're crying. I mean, that's all. It doesn't mean anything. It meant nothing. So the only people that were waiting for the coming of the Messiah, who could read the Bible in this original language, it was their prophets that delivered, that gave these sacred oracles of the Lord. They're the only people that won't convert to Christianity? How does that work? Why is it so hard to convert them? They should be the easiest. They gather and they put us, you, me, under a microscope to figure out what is the problem of evangelizing Jews. And they discover there are, in fact, a number of unique problems with regards to the Jews. The first problem they recognize is how do I say this? A public relations problem, a minor PR problem. Now, what possible PR problem could the church have with us, with the Jews? They discovered for some reason that Jewish people tend to equate Christianity with persecution. I know it's crazy, right? But yeah, they somehow realize that Jewish people, when they hear someone say Jesus Christ, instead of go, what am I to hear those words? Say it again, I want to get more nachas. Most Jews, once enough, fine, get it out of your system. Most Jews, you're in the airport and you see two priests walking with the Roman collar, right? Jews are there, what a pleasure to see. I wish there were more priests here. There's not enough nuns in this airport. Let's get them more. But we notice them. We always notice them, don't we, right? You're in the airport and you're by whatever gate you're waiting for, and there's two nuns sitting there, and every Jew, give a look at that, what's over there, right? Every Jew notices and is looking. I wonder what she's thinking now. Now, if that nun would come over to you and ask you any question in the world, you would be 10 times nicer to her than anybody else. You'd go out of your way. You would overcompensate, be nice. But we really notice them. We're sitting there. I wonder what he's thinking right now, right? If we're in shul, right? And there's a bar mitzvah going on, and there are people who are there who are not Jewish. We know they're Christians, right? We know it, and every Jew is watching. I wonder what they're thinking right now, right? Why is it? Why do we have this? Because there's 2,000 years of persecution. It strikes us as very odd. No, Jew in the old city of Yerushalayim, here it's nothing. Here you have a lot of priests, whatever, but in the old city of Jerusalem, you have You never saw priests like this. It's very sophisticated. They have big outfits and helmets and shmatas. They're wearing and walking through the old city, and they have parades going into the church of this church and that church. It's a whole scene. And you can see Hasidic Jews look, look what's going on there. Why do we have that response to it? Because if we see a guy who's a Hare Krishna, wearing long saffron pajamas with a tambourine and half of his head is shaved, right? And he has incense. So every Jew thinks the same thing. That poor mother, right? It doesn't have the same. So they realize that, 2,000 years of this, the Jewish people look at Christianity as something that's really quite hostile. I mean, my yeshiva, the Mir, escaped the Holocaust by making its way into occupied China and then into Japan. And Japan wasn't the problem. The Japanese didn't know what anti-Semitism was. It's not that they weren't anti-Semitic, they just didn't understand it. In the Far East, they don't really understand anti-Semitism. It doesn't make sense then. To them, if you're successful, if you're smart, if you have strong family values and work ethics, that's what matters to them. In fact, when rabbis in the Mir Yeshiva who asked by the Japanese, why do our allies, why do the Germans hate you so much? Why do they were smart. Rosh Yeshiva answered them, because we're Asians. Oh, okay. So that settled that issue. So they realized Christians realized they have to do something with this pure problem. And it goes like this. You're Jewish, Rabbi? We love you. Oh, we love you. Because you're Jewish, you're the chosen, you're the apple of God's eye. We love you. Baruch Hashem. We love the Jews because you're chosen. And we love Israel. Oh, Christians persecuting Jews in the name of Jesus. They weren't real Christians because, after all, a real Christian loves the Jewish people. They realize are problematic because the Jews equate Christianity with persecution, but they realize also there's a second reason why Jews are resistant or reluctant to convert to Christianity. It's precisely that. They don't want to stop being Jewish. They're proud of their Jewish identity. And that's where the second technique came in that was devastatingly successful. When you become a believer in Jesus, you'll be told by the Messianic leaders in this city, you're not converting to another religion. Rather, you're becoming a Messianic Jew, a completed Jew, a fulfilled Jew. It's the most Jewish thing you can do. I brought this along with me. All the way from Israel. This is mamash, a training manual on how to share the gospel with a Jew. Okay? It's very well done. In the training manual, there's a communications card. Communications, a Messianic soul winner's card. This is given to evangelical Christians, and there are two columns. On this card, there are two columns. The column on the right side at the very top says, don't say. That's this side. So there's a column of things, don't say. And the column on your left, I don't even see back there, says at the very top, oh, you can see from there. Okay. Let's go through some of the don't says and do says so you understand exactly how this works. When witnessing to a Jew, don't say Jesus Christ. Apparently, Jesus Christ doesn't sound very Jewish. Do say the Messiah Yeshua. That's nice, right? Don't say to a Jew, convert. Jews do not want to convert. Don't talk about converting. That's the third rail. No converting. Say become a Messianic Jew. Isn't that special? Okay, terrific. Don't say become a Christian, become a Messianic believer. Don't say come to church. Do not say come to church. Don't say come to church. Jews do not want to go to church. They don't. Jews do not want to go to church. They don't. They don't even want to go to shul. How are you going to get them in? Come to a Messianic congregation. The training manual has, most of it is what not to do when witnessing to a Jew. Pages of this, things that we think you ought to avoid doing or saying when witnessing to a Jew, verses to memorize when evangelizing a Jew. This is very well put together, very well organized. Let me just go through some of this. Some of this is really, oh, this is good. Okay, this is good advice. When witnessing to a Jew, okay, avoid anti-Semitic terms. And then they give you a list of those terms in case you didn't get the memo, so they want you to know what those terms are, such as Jewing down. Don't use a term like Jewing down when witnessing to a Jew. It doesn't. Kikes, not a good thing. Once that's in there, it's hard to dial that back or say, I was taken out of context. Christ killers, also not a good idea. I'm not kidding. Who said, come on? Dirty Jew. Do not say dirty Jew when evangelizing a Jew. And Jew boy, also not a good idea. Avoid jokes about the Jewish people. I don't know why. And then in parentheses it says their money, etc. I don't know. Some Jewish people are very sensitive about this. Jewish, do you think they celebrate Christmas in Messianic congregations? Santa Claus is Christmas? No. No Christmas, no Easter bunnies, none of that stuff goes on there. I brought this with me. This is a Messianic Passover Haggadah. If you went to a Messianic Seder in Montreal, don't do it. But if you did it, so the table is set up pretty much how you would expect but once you listen, you realize there's something. Let me explain. So all the accoutrements that are present at your Seder table is on theirs as well. However, they give it a Christological meaning. So they have wine at their Seder, just like you do. However, you were there. So no, I'm kidding. So they'll tell you the wine represents the blood of Jesus. Right? What are you davening? I'm kidding. Okay, that was very good. And the matzah, what does the matzah represent? Yeah, and you're good. And why do Jews have 3 matzah at the Seder table? Why 3? To represent the Holy Trinity, the Av, Ben, and Ruach HaKodesh. And why are the matzahs perforated? You ever wonder they have little holes in them? Because Jesus was perforated, he had holes in him. Go no. Why are there stripes, lines going up and down the matzah? Because Jesus was whipped, scourged before the crucifixion, so he had lines on him, just like a matzah. Do you know why the middle matzah is broken? Because Jesus was broken. You know why that middle matzah is wrapped in a white shmata? Because Jesus was wrapped in a white shroud. You know that matzah is hidden beneath the Father? Because Jesus was hidden away in the tomb. You know why that matzah is brought back at the very end of the Seder? Because Jesus will return. Everyone, praise the Lord together. Okay, great. And this section is going, I'm going to pass out right now. Oh, yeah, but, it is so good to see. Am I seeing you again? Did I just see you recently in Eretz Yisrael? Oh, it's beautiful seeing you again. Wow. We just saw each other in Yerushalayim just a few weeks ago. What I want to do before I take your questions is there's one part of this equation which we didn't cover, and it was really quite convenient. I confess, it is very easy for us to sit here, and we could do this for a long time, and speak about these groups like Chosen People Ministries, right here in Montreal, of Friends of Israel Gospel Ministries, they're right here. Beth Yeshua, right here in Montreal. We could talk about that, spend a lot of time telling you about all the stuff they do, and it would be very offensive to you. But there's one part that's not as convenient, and that is, what are we doing wrong? It's easy to point the finger at them. It's harder to look in the mirror and wonder, do we have any role in this? And the answer is, I would suggest that we do. I would suggest, my brothers and sisters, that the success of groups like Jews for Jesus really represents the unpaid bills of the Jewish people. Jewish education, as an example. Who are joining the ranks of Jews for Jesus? Are they our sons and daughters that have a Jewish education? Invest in your children now. Give them a yeshiva education. Learn about the prophets of Israel. The kids who join the ranks of these groups are sons and daughters that know nothing about the faith they've been asked to abandon. They don't know. And these missionaries take advantage of that. They're very friendly. They're very friendly. You go into a Messianic congregation, you've never been there before. Everyone, you ever walk into a shul you've never been to before? What are the first things you might hear? You're in my seat. It's a problem. So they're very, very outgoing. The key is, if we know, if our people understand our own faith and the eternal oracles that were transmitted to our nation, no missionary would be able to rob us of a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I say this to some of you here. Maybe you already have an estate planned for your children and grandchildren. You might want to consider saying to your daughter, I'll pay for my granddaughter's Jewish education. Invest in your family now. A Jewish camp makes a big difference in people's lives. Invest in your family now, not after you're 120, they do what they want. That's how we preserve it. We're living in a remarkable time now. And please God, together we will see the event that was promised by a prophet who lived in my city. His name is Zephaniah, chapter 3, verse 9. Where all the nations will speak B'safa Brura, in a pure speech, and will welcome the coming of the true Mashiach quickly in our time. To each and every one of you, I personally thank you so much for having me here in Montreal this evening. Thank you. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא עת נעשה בחפצו כל